Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this OCS and NASCAS CSBG Annual Report Update. My name is Katie Kajowski, and I'm the Research Director with NASCAS. All participants should be on mute this afternoon. We will be taking all questions in the chat window, which is off to the right-hand side of your screen. So as we go, if you have questions, place them in the chat. We'll hold them until the end of the webinar, and then we will respond to all of your questions. Next slide. So this afternoon, we have myself presenting along with Muska Cameron, our project manager here at NASCAS, and Monique Alcantara, the Management and Program Analyst with the Office of Community Services. We have a great agenda for you this afternoon, next slide, where we will be talking all about the CSBG Annual Report. We'll provide you with a timeline of when you can expect certain things to happen, the reporting process that includes smart forms and XML transfer. We will be talking about the OLD submissions, the data review process. We'll introduce you to the CSBG Performance Management website, and we will talk about some tools and resources and show you where you can get those. So before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to Monique, who is going to introduce herself from OCS. I think you're on mute, Monique.
There it goes. Yes, I was muted on the WebEx. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. This is Monique Alcantara from the Office of Community Services. Thank you for joining us. We know that everyone is eager to receive more information about the annual report and the upcoming completion of that, the first round of the full annual report. So we're excited to be able to be here and be able to provide some details. And I'll just pass it back to Muska.
Hello, everybody. This is Muska from NASCAS. So let's start off by seeing how far we've come. In January of 2017, we know that we received OMB approval for the new CSBG annual report, and then shortly after, in March, the instruction manual for Module 1 was released, and then states submitted Module 1 of the new CSBG annual report for the first time into OLDC on April 7th. And in July, the July through June states actually began collecting data for Modules 2 through 4 of the new annual report. In October, the October through September states began collecting data, and then by January 1st of 2018, all the states had begun collecting data for Module 2 through 4, and then this past April, states submitted the fiscal year 17 CSBG IS, which marks the final submission of the IS. Next slide.
It looks like my screen is, oh, there we are, never mind.
So where we are right now, the CSBG IS report has been completely phased out. We are no longer submitting the IS. All states are collecting and reporting in the new CSBG annual report for modules 1 through 4. A few states, those July through June states I mentioned earlier, are actually in their second year of data collection, which is exciting. So in addition to Module 1, states will be submitting Module 2, 3, and 4 into OLDC by the submission deadline. Next slide. So how we're going to submit. You guys have been submitting Module 1 for a couple of years now, so you are familiar with submitting into OLDC, and we'll be submitting it the exact same way into OLDC this year as well. Module 2 through 4 will be available as smart forms to all states and agencies. And states who have statewide database systems can use an XML schema to transfer their data to populate the fields into OLDC. Next slide. So we're excited to share that the smart forms will be available to all states and agencies for free. There will be no charge or cost for them because they are the baseline for reporting. And now I'll hand it over to Katie to walk through the reporting process a bit more.
Great, thanks, Muska. Before I get started on some specifics about smart forms, I just want to make note that we are recording this presentation, and we will be posting this on the NASCAS website by Monday of next week. So this will be available to you all, of course, who are on the call and anybody else that you feel needs this information that couldn't be with us this afternoon. So what are these smart forms that we keep talking about? We understand that not every state has experience with smart forms yet. So essentially, they are an Excel document that has various rules built into that document that can do things like alert a user that data may be potentially entered incorrectly, that a field might be left blank, or that, for example, if you enter participants served in an NPI and you don't enter that anybody obtained an outcome, you would receive a flag. The smart form can also alert a user to potential bad data, right? So if you enter a negative number or if you exceed a character limit, you would receive an error. These smart forms will highlight cells, make noises, give you an error message, and this is all to help aid in the data entry process. You might see highlighted cells if things are left unaddressed or unchanged, right? Because we all know through the current data review process that even if something's flagged as potentially incorrect, it might be correct. So we're leaving these things highlighted so that agencies can work with their state offices to reconcile any data anomalies that might be left in these forms. These also do just that, offer a place for states and agencies to work together to reconcile their data, to review the data prior to submitting into OLDC. Next slide. So that all sounds great, but there's a certain level of limitation to the smart form. The smart form is not a human, so there will still need to be some type of review process in place that occurs between states and local agencies. These smart forms, of course, will not be able to compare different sections of a module to each other, such as the NPIs to all characteristics. These smart forms can't compare different modules. For example, what a state office reported in Module 1 can't be compared to what a local agency reported in Module 2. The smart forms can't ensure that agencies actually address an error that is identified in that smart form, or that the form is submitted without errors to a state office. It can't ensure that there's comments submitted into the smart form that really provide some type of explanation for the data. And they can't ensure that the state reviews the smart form and gets the information that they need from local agencies. So again, there will be need to be some type of human involvement and communication between state offices and local agencies as you're reviewing this data. So now that you know all of that, let's take a look at what these smart forms look like. So again, this is the quote-unquote baseline reporting. This is an Excel document that has those built-in rules, and these are free to everybody in the network. This is a screenshot of the Module 2 smart form. You can see it looks very similar to the Excel documents that are currently located on the NASCAST website. On the left side, you will enter your FY18 data, and in Module 2 and only Module 2 will there be some data comparisons from the previous year, and it is only in a select few data points. And it's this in Section A, and Section C, which is the former Section F, will be the only comparisons from previous years. Next slide. This is a screenshot of the Module 3 smart form. As you can see, it looks just like the Community Initiative Status form, but it has some functionality built into it where you can utilize drop-downs and checkboxes. The left side of the right side of the screen is where you'll write your narratives right? So for example, in the community initiative status form, narratives exist in the problem identification, number 3 on the status form, and number 4, the goal agenda. So those will pop up and allow you to enter your narratives on the right side of the screen so that they're readable. And let's take a look at the Module 4 Smart Form. So again, this looks just exactly like the Excel documents that are on the NASCAS website, but we have the Smart Form rules built in. So you can see that there's error boxes, there's coloring, you know, there's some things that make this a little bit more advanced than our regular Excel document. Let's take a look at the next screenshot, which is section C of Module 4, the All Characteristics Report, and we've built in some rules here to hopefully ensure that the data entered is as correct and accurate as it possibly can be. And so let's take a look at what the Smart Form submission process is. Next slide. So we get the question regularly, when will the Smart Forms be released? Because typically about now is when states receive not only the baseline Excel forms, but also the Smart Forms. So we will be releasing Smart Forms as soon as possible. We anticipate them to be released as early as mid-December, but they could be released as late as January. Their release is contingent upon successful testing of the Smart Form into OLDC. We will likely be able to release Module 3 first and then Module 2 and 4. And the reason for this is because on the back side of Module 2 and 4 is an XML schema that populates OLDC. So we need to make sure that that all works correctly as expected before we can release these. Each Smart Form will be pre-populated with each local community action's name, their DUNS number, and those very select few Module 2 data points. And agencies will complete the Smart Form, send it back to their state offices, and upload the forms to OLDC by the submission deadline. Next. So you might ask, well, that's great, but my state has a statewide database where all community action agencies enter data, and that's great. So that's an excellent thing. So we've developed a process so that those states who have that statewide database or that statewide data warehousing solution can export their data to an XML schema that is then uploaded into OLDC. So those states who have a statewide database don't necessarily need to use Smart Forms. They can export that data directly to an XML that will then be uploaded to OLDC. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Monique, who's going to talk with us about Module 3 process.
Hi, everyone. So just to talk a little bit about Module 3. Module 3 fields will not be built into OLDC in this first year of data submission. The states are going to upload an attachment to OLDC. So this is similar for the states who have been doing this for the past few years with Module 1 and with the state plan. They will just be, there will be a separate space for Module 3, but they'll just upload the document as a form level attachment. Additionally, in addition to that, if you would like a pre-review of Module 3, we understand that Module 3 is its own new type of module. NASCAS is offering to do that prior to submitting to OLDC. If you are interested in this, you should let NASCAS know no later than November 21st. And then NASCAS will also release a due date based upon the number of states interested. So the important date here is November 21st, so please reach out to NASCAS if you want to do a pre-review of your Module 3 submission. Next slide. So speaking of submissions in OLDC, we have a kind of staged implementation. Module 1 will open up December 1st. It will be completed as it has been in the past 2 years. And we're just opening it up early because it's ready to go. The states have been doing this for a while now, so we're thinking this would help with just getting this one done. And then modules 2 through 4 will open up February 1st. That being said, the full annual report will be due April 30th. We did push back the due date to just give you guys a little bit more time to fill this out and work on it, and we understand it's the first submission. And OCS and NASCAS will be reviewing this as a whole. So even though you're submitting Module 1 earlier, we'll still be reviewing the annual report as one report. Next slide. So here's a screenshot of Section A of Module 2 within OLDC. For those of you who have completed a state plan or from Module 1, you'll see that looks very similar. When you upload your XML schema, it will actually fill out this information, and then you'll be able to look at it at a state level or for each of your individual eligible entities. Next slide. And this is a screenshot of Section B within Module 2. And the same thing, when you upload your XML schema, you'll be able to look at an overall state form as well as each eligible entity. Next slide. And here's a screenshot for Section C. So it looks just like what you've seen in our release information, and it looks like what you've been doing with Modules 1 in the state plan. Next slide. So now I want to talk a little bit about the review process. We'll review Module 1 as we've done in the past. This, again, is the third submission of Module 1. The review process will be completed by OCS, and we'll be assessing the clarity and completeness of the data to ensure accuracy. And the review will also focus on continuous improvement. Next slide. And then for Modules 2 and 4, again, we recognize that this is the first year of Modules 2 and 4 and that we are receiving baseline data. Only a select few data points can be compared to the previous year, and they're located in Module 2 only. There will be a review process completed by OCS and NASCAS that will assess the completeness and reasonableness of the data to ensure accuracy. It will not be as in-depth of a review with the IS, since this is baseline data. Next slide, and I'll pass it back to Katie.
Okay, so we received the question regularly, well, what does that review really look like? So the two things that we're really looking for are completeness of the data and reasonableness of the data. And when we talk about completeness of the data, we mean, is the form complete? Did you complete the demographics form? Are CSBG expenditures reported? Are any services reported? Are any SNPIs reported? And really just ensuring that what you intended to report is there in the report, and that it wasn't accidental, that something was left blank or something along those lines. And then reasonableness of the data. Does the data reported make sense? Are more people reported to have obtained a job than the total people served in the demographics? And is that logical? If the indicators that are specific to seniors have data, are seniors reported in the demographics? In Module 2, for example, we might look for some significant changes in any one funding source. Did an agency lose a particular type of funding, or some of those similar things that we've looked at currently with the IS. And let's go on to the next slide, because that review process for 2 and 4 doesn't necessarily apply to Module 3. So as Monique was talking about, OCS and NASCAS will review each Module 3 submission using the Module 3 review tool, which we'll talk about in a moment, which everybody in the country will have access to. This tool was developed with the help of the Module 3 pilot project that NASCAS hosted, and it was reviewed by the CSBG Data Task Force. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, but I'm going to turn it back over to Monique, who's going to talk about some specifics with the federal review.
Hello again. So as I mentioned earlier, we're doing a staged opening of OLDC for everyone to begin submitting their Module 1 December 1st, and then modules 2 through 4 starting February 1st. But we do plan to review the annual report in full as one report. So reviews will start May 1st, 2019 this year. You may recall we did something similar with the first submission of Module 1 2 years ago, where all the reviews started at one time. And we will be sending feedback to states within 60 days of May 1st. So that's June 30th. By June 30th, you'll have some feedback. This will also, this year, be a joint review for the CSBG annual report from your OSCS program specialist and with NASCAS. So you won't receive separate emails for your annual report reviews. You'll receive one email from your program specialist, and the review will be conducted by OCS and NASCAS. And we're still working on the full details, and we'll make sure that we continue to keep you up to date or informed as we are working through this process. Next slide. Now I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about the performance management website. This is something that we've been talking about for maybe a year now that we've been working on. The OCS website will highlight CSBG data, and it's going to be state-level aggregate data will be made public on the website, but states will also have access to a private side of the website to pull their own reports and view their data at not just the state level, but even at the eligible entity level. But I do want to note the updates to the data will still only be made through OLDC. And the first year of the performance management website, which we're hoping to launch next year, probably in the second quarter or the third quarter, so around April. And the first year, only Module 1 and state plan information will be available on the website. Next slide. So here's a glimpse of what it looks like for the states who also have LIHEAP within their offices. LIHEAP does have their performance management website, and ours is going to look similar to theirs. So for those who are familiar with the LIHEAP performance management website, they'll have the same look and feel. Next slide. And we'll have dashboards as well. So here's an example of a WIOA dashboard at the national level. So you'll be able to pull graphs and charts, and you'll be able to look at like-sized states and people who are around the same amount of money and funding, and pull information about particular programs that we do with our CSBG funding. Next slide. And I'll hand it back to Muska.
Great. So some tools and resources to help you prepare for the annual report. We're going to have a lot coming your way in the next few weeks. Please keep your eye out for updated instruction manuals, the CSBG annual report lexicon. We anticipate these two coming out pretty shortly. The lexicon is basically going to provide definitions for some terms used in the annual report. And then we're going to have a data dictionary for developers and IT staff that will provide some technical specifications for them in building the system to match the CSBG annual report. For those who don't have a database system yet but are looking to procure one, we will be coming out with a toolkit for developing an RFP. We'll obviously have the smart forms and the XML schema coming out. We'll also have a list of suggested language for writing in any other NPIs that you might have. And then we'll also be coming out with lots of different FAQs on various topics related to the annual report, MOUs, public CAFs, and lots of different other topics. For right now, where you can access resources, you could just go to our website, and then you would go to data collection and reporting, click on annual report, and then you could go through the modules for any resources that we've already created for them, and obviously you can access the instruction manuals on that tab over there. The pre-review process, we've already mentioned it, but just a reminder, next slide. Just a reminder again that if you would like NASCAS to pre-review your Module 3 submissions or any other parts of the annual report, please email Katie Kajowski at kajowski@nascas.org no later than November 21st. Next slide. And then this is a snapshot of a tool that will also be we will be releasing shortly. It's a review tool for state offices to use when they're analyzing the Module 3 submissions. So it provides a nice, neat checklist on things to check off and see, do they meet the requirements for a narrative, for the problem identification, or for the goal and the agenda. So this will be coming out shortly. Next slide. I'm going to pass it back over to Monique to talk about the stage implementation of Module 3.
So in April, we released a Dear Colleague about the annual report Module 3 stage implementation. And based on some feedback that we received from some of the states about Module 3, we decided to kind of break it up. So for stage 1, states have the option of submitting a complete submission or a partial submission. So with a complete submission, you'll complete Module 3 in full, including the Section A, N, B, and C. And with the partial submission, you'll just complete questions 1 through 7 of the initiative status form. You'll still submit both through OLDC, regardless of whether you decide to do a complete submission or a partial submission. You are able to send both submissions to NASCAS for pre-review if you like. We'll review it while we're reviewing the full annual report between May 1st and June 30th, and we'll provide technical assistance as needed. And then next year, for fiscal year 2018 data, you'll do a full reporting. So you'll complete the Module 3 in full, and that will be due in March of 2020. And yeah, next slide.
All right, so this is just a screenshot of our page on the Data Task Force. The Data Task Force has been helping us develop a lot of the tools that we will be releasing shortly. So this page is where you could go to just quickly see updates. I know recently they released an FAQ on analysis. They've also released an interactive version of the theory of change. So this would be a really cool place to check out the resources that we'll be pushing out to the network. And then next slide. This is a map to show that we really are pulling members into the Data Task Force from across the country of various capacities, whether they're local agency members, state associations, state office, or national partners, and obviously OCS federal partner as well. So the Data Task Force really does consist of just everybody from the network, and they have been doing a great job giving us insight into the needs of the network and helping us develop these tools. And without any further ado, we'll open it up to Q&A right now. We've received a lot of questions, which is why we are hosting this webinar, precisely to answer all of your questions. So while I read through to see which questions we received so far, please feel free to continue typing and submitting your questions into either the chat bar or the Q&A located to your right.
So, Muska, this is Katie. I'll just jump in because I saw a couple questions related to similar things, one of which is the deadline for submission. So the deadline for state offices to submit all of their local agency data into the online data collection system is April 30th of 2019. Having said that, each state will require a different submission date for local agencies to get their data to them. And so that's not uniform across the country. That's just based on whatever processes your state office has in place.
Great. So then moving on to the rest of the questions. The first question is, will the smart forms be sent to the state and then the state will send it to each individual agency?
Yes. Yes. OCS and NASCAS will populate the smart forms with local agency's name, DUNS number, and in Module 2, some very specific data points from FY17. They will be sent as a package to state offices, and state offices will disseminate them accordingly, assuming the state is using smart forms Otherwise, the state will stick with their own internal processes with their statewide database.
All right, the next question is asking if the smart form has macros to determine errors and other alerts, and then they would like clarification on whether or not vendors should be able to export the data into an Excel format. They would like to know if this form is based on manual data entry only.
No, the XML will also be able to populate the smart forms.
There's a question on whether a beta version of the forms will be available prior to formal release.
Beta testing has occurred with OCS, NASCAS, and the Data Task Force, which is comprised of local agencies, state offices, state associations. We won't release a beta form across the nation because we don't want to have multiple drafts out there. We'll release the finalized version when it's available following final testing.
All right. There's a question asking why an organization would want to submit Module 3 early and have a pre-review.
That's a great question. And, you know, Monique and, of course, Muska, jump in wherever you think. And I think that this goes back to that completeness and reasonableness. We really, you know, Module 3 it's brand new. We've never done this before. We've always had community level work as part of our work, but we've never reported it in this way. And so we want to ensure collectively that what we're putting forward to OCS is just that. It's a complete submission, number one, but also that it is in fact community level work. As Muska showed you that review form that we'll be releasing to the network shortly that was developed by the Module 3 pilot project, which consisted of 5 different state offices who collectively provided community initiative status forms from across their networks, and we all came together and went over them and said, you know, here's some questions we have, and how do we take a look at these forms, and what is it that we're actually asking of the network in these forms? So for NASCAS to do a pre-review would be going through that process to ensure that, you know, is there a community level need here? Do all of these things that are reported in the form align? Muska, Monique, any additional comments?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've noticed from the pilot that we have been doing on Module 3 states, so we've had a pilot of 5 states that have worked with NASCAS to review their Module 3 submissions, is the pre-review really helps because a lot of times the state offices are the ones that are obviously reviewing their agency's forms, but the state office also has a lot of questions, and so it's useful for them to reach out to NASCAS and just have some dialogue on these questions.
And this is Seth Hassett. I'm just going to join in on this topic, and I just want to say everything that Katie and Muska it makes good sense and agree with, and just to highlight that, again, the idea is that that this is not only one of the more important areas of kind of change in our data collection, but again, an area that we want. We want to make sure that ultimately, since these are going to be generally multi-year initiatives or efforts that can be reported on and over the course of a few years, we want to make sure we get off to a good start. And so there are going to be just some multiple opportunities to kind of put together an initial submission, get input about that, and even over the upcoming year, we will be doing more work in that area, so that again, the basic concept that these are the distinction between a community change effort that would be reported in Module 3 and other kinds of individual and family services that are reported in Module 4 makes sense. and over time also that as people begin to establish PIC indicators and targets, that we are doing that in a way that the indicators make sense for the initiative that's being proposed, and that we have, we're working hard to set achievable goals. And so the more our general thinking here is, since this is the newest part and one of the most important parts of the new work we're doing, we just want to provide multiple opportunities for people to share early and again to get as much technical assistance as possible so that this gets off to a good start.
Great, thank you, Seth. Just some follow-up questions on Module 3 is, what data will be used for matching in subsequent years? If an agency has 10 initiatives, how will you match that they're reporting the same initiative in subsequent years?
So some of that we're actually still under development of how we will address multiple years moving forward. I think, again, this is the baseline year, as you heard Monique talk about, and we will collect the responses and I think make some policy determinations and process determinations based on some of those submissions. So some of this is still being worked out, so I don't think we can comment quite yet on that.
I will add to that, this is Monique, that the online data collection system, or OLDC, as we've been referring it to, we didn't take into account that there may be some newer people on this webinar, does have things ingrained in it to be able to clone or tell we're pulling information from a previous year. So we are, as Katie mentioned, we are looking into that, and we are going to work for that for subsequent years to make sure that we're able to tie together initiatives that are the same initiative and they're going forward from year to year, because we know that most initiatives are going to be multi-year initiatives.
Great. And then just a reminder that the deadline date for pre-review of Module 3 is to reach out to NASCAS by emailing Katie Kujawski no later than November 21st. There's a question on whether states will be entering each individual agency smart form into OLDC.
No, so when the states upload that XML schema, they'll upload one XML schema for all their eligible entities. So if you have one eligible entity or 59 eligible entities, you're still following one process, one upload, and then it'll filter out into the individual eligible entities. And on that end, if you end up having to make an update and you only need to update the one eligible entity, or two or three eligible entities, you'll still do one upload and it'll filter out to the new information. So you won't have to continuously upload all 59 eligible entities.
Great, and we do have a couple folks that are new and it's their first time working with the CSBG annual report, so they've asked for clarification on what OLDC is.
So the OLDC is called the Online Data Collection System. It's available through Grant Solutions. It is the Administration for Children and Families database. It's used for mandatory grants as well as discretionary grants, and it's not really a data repository per se, but it is a way to submit your reports, whether it's your state plans and applications, your annual reports, your fiscal and financial reports that are also due by ACS mandate. So it is just a place to submit applications and reports.
Great, thank you. There's a question on when the XML schema would be released to the vendors.
Along with the smart forms. So again, following testing of the smart forms against OLDC, the earliest will be mid-December. The latest could be sometime in January.
And then when will the software RFP be released?
The RFP template, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
that probably won't be released for a few months from now. We are working on a priority scale here, I guess, with getting reporting up and running as our highest priority right now for the network, and some of the other additional tools will follow successful reporting.
Great. Going back to Module 3, there's a question on whether somebody would report on an initiative if they're in year 4 or 5 of that initiative, or if this is a baseline year, do they count it as year 1?
Agencies should report their community level initiatives regardless of the year that they're in. So if you're in year 4 of a 5-year initiative, then you should report that as year 4 of 5-year initiative. If you're in year 1 of an initiative, we of course want to see any new initiative. You can even report initiatives that are still in that planning process. If you think it's going to take you 5 years and you're very early into that, and it's a community level initiative, then report that.
There's a question on the upload process. If, as one upload for Modules 4, how we handle 44 agencies? Is it 44 tabs in a single spreadsheet?
I'm sorry, say that again, Muska?
They're asking if they have, say, 44 agencies and 44 forms, does that mean, so they're just asking for more clarification, does that mean it's going to be 44 tabs on a single spreadsheet, which will make it one? Yes,
so that
module
for
module
the smart form.
So no. Okay, so for Module 2 and 4, every agency gets their own form. And then that's what it is. For Module 3, every initiative gets its own form. So if one agency is reporting 2 separate initiatives, it'll be 2 separate forms. Is that what they're asking?
Well, I think they're trying to understand what the single upload for a state looks like. When, let's say, they're uploading all the Module 4 smart forms they've received. So if they're doing a single upload, does that mean that it's one Excel spreadsheet with multiple tabs for each agency form?
So Muska, I think what it sounded like is that we are going to have to do another webinar where we're talking about the smart forms and how that will transfer into an XML schema and therefore how it'll upload into OLDC.
Right.
Because that is a pretty loaded question, and I understand how it can be confusing because, yes, each eligible entity for Modules 2 and 4 will have their own smart form. So we need to have another webinar where we really just focus on how those smart forms work and how they'll transfer into an XML schema so that there's only one upload into OLDC.
All right, and then just 2 general questions. Are smart forms required now? And then will there be training or technical assistance provided to local agencies for completing the form?
So
smart forms are not required. They're not required. If you have your own database, you have your own database. But if you do not, but they're highly recommended. So if you're not working with a database that can easily transfer into an XML schema, then we are asking that you use the smart forms. Because that is going to be the way that you're able to upload into OLDC.
Yep. There's 2 ways of reporting. One way is via the smart form, and the other way is a statewide database system.
And training or technical assistance will be provided to local agencies completing the forms.
Oh, yes. So as Monique mentioned, we need another webinar on smart forms, but we need other webinars as well on, the variety of topics that surround reporting for FY18. So those will be forthcoming, And certainly as we have more information about release dates and a release of additional tools and resources, we will make those available to the network in webinar format and the variety of other ways we do training and technical assistance.
And I believe that's it for the questions that we have received, unless Katie and Monique, you're finding some other questions.
No, I just want to reiterate that the eligible entities will be submitting their data to the states, and the states will be uploading it to OLDC. Each eligible entity will not be required to do that. And right now, there's not a way for that to happen. And if you are someone who's newer and you'll be doing this for the first time, please reach out to your program specialist. Please reach out to Katie or to NASCAS. We'll have to get you registered in OLDC and all of that. So the earlier that you reach out to us so that we can start getting you prepared, the better.
Yeah, so it looks like that is it for questions. This webinar will be posted to the NASCAS website on Monday. So if you need to catch Katie's email again or need to see some of the information again, you will be able to see the slides on Monday on our website. If you have any other questions, as Monique said, please do feel free to reach out to NASCAS and OCS. And thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon.